What is the worst physical pain you've ever felt? Story 1. Abscess tooth. But wait, let me finish. Abscess tooth after the dentist removed the wrong tooth, the one next to the abscess tooth, on the way home when the local wore off. Unfortunately, a lawsuit was not an option. This was a low-income state-sponsored thing that the dentists volunteered for, and part of getting them to volunteer was a no-liability thing. Plus, at the time, I kind of figured I'd probably explained which tooth was wrong, rather than him just pulling the wrong one. I'm guessing I probably could have held the state liable, but at the time, I was much younger and not very savvy, so I never pursued it. I've noted a couple of people say that kidney stones are more painful than abscess teeth. Now, I've had kidney stones, and I'm guessing you didn't let me finish. Also, abscess teeth can vary in pain intensity, as can kidney stones. When I was a kid, and I got my tooth pulled out, they forgot to equip any anesthetic, so I felt the whole process, and in my stupid child mind, I just thought it was supposed to go like that. I had a dentist use medication I'm allergic to and then break the molar, leaving a shard in my mouth. I was screaming like I was being murdered and the guy wouldn't stop. Husband damn near bulldozed his way through the door trying to get the dentist to stop. He left the infected root and tooth parts in, packed in gauze, and kicked me out. Had to go to a 24-hour emergency dentist at 3 a.m. because it wouldn't stop bleeding and hurting. The dentist gave me a different medication, waited until I was fully numb and relaxed, removed everything in a short few minutes, and gave me the medicine I was able to handle without issues. Second, a doctor in the south-northwest suburbs area of Chicago removed my 4 wisdom teeth, gave me a med I was highly allergic to, and sent me back to my city by Amtrak. I got lockjaw, which caused me to drink blended food for 6 weeks, only for the lockjaw to relax and cause small clots to block both my eyes, causing temporary blindness. Optic neuritis for 3 months. 2004 was a very rough year. How the hell did he get that wrong? Story 2. Gout. I thought lovingly about removing my foot with a hacksaw. Gout is the absolute worst. I thought I knew pain until that day. The worst part is, the pain doesn't come in waves. Whatever your brain does to alleviate pain is not strong enough to give you a break. It is just constant, indescribable pain in one joint of your toe. Mothers who've had it describe it as worse than childbirth. I remember sitting there delirious with pain, feeling sad about all the people alive right now, and who have ever lived, that had to experience pain on that level while everyone else went about their lives comfortably. Like, how can you smile right now, person on the TV, when pain like this is a thing that the brain can experience and people are suffering? Cutting off one's own foot with a hacksaw and no anesthetic would be a relief. You just gotta soldier through the suffering and think about the difficulty of living without a foot. Holy, this hurts. You can't describe it to other people. You are hurt like nobody knows, but a day later it can be gone. Was hit with a hockey ball really slowly. I went down like Neymar during a football match. For 10 minutes. I could not breathe. Nobody understood it, and after 10 minutes I stood up like everything was fine. Got it in my left big toe for almost half a year. Went to check if it was rheumatism, but it was just gout. The doctor put an injection of medication directly into my toe, and within an hour it went away. That night it came back, but not in my foot, in my knee. I thought my toe was terrible. My knee was so much worse. The medication doesn't work anymore. I have done a 4-month trial of eating vegan. Never had it anymore. Now I am trying a few animal products again. Chicken and fish are fine, but meat from cows, that night it will come back straight away. That just sounds awful. Story 3. Pilonidal cyst, right on your tailbone, from snowboarding and then having to sit on a 4-hour flight. Doesn't sound like much, but if you've had one, sitting upright was hell. This happened to me when I was 18 years old. I attempted to ignore it for a week, and it got so bad that I could not sit down. Idiot teenagers move right there. I believe it came from a tailbone injury much earlier in life. I'll never forget the day I got it lanced. The doctor needed to numb the area before he lanced it. There I was, laying on my stomach at the exam table with my butt exposed to the world. The doctor tells me he is about to apply the LN2 spray, and boy did he do that very liberally. So much so that it dripped down to the back of my balls and felt like someone stabbed my nuts with an ice pick. Still, the cyst was some of the worst pain I've ever been in. And then, the constant packing of the gauze daily that my poor neighbor who was a nurse offered to do for me. Now if that's not neighborly, I don't know what is. This was it for me. I can't even begin the pure terror I get after a long road trip or gym session where we are doing core work on our butts and feel the slightest bump back there. I went to emergency care and they had 4 nurses hold me down while the doctor attempted to lance. He said the swelling was too much and the skin was inflamed after poking me for 5 minutes straight. Come back when it's not so inflamed. 2 days later, I grabbed one of those incredibly pointy pimple poppers and did it myself. My blood pressure is literally rising just thinking about the pain that is a pilonidal cyst. I have religiously washed my butt crack every day since. And think about how I'm sitting on any long drive or flight. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. Story 4. Hockey puck at 80 kilometers per hour versus my right testicle, resulting in a testicular rupture and a surgery 2 days later, and didn't lose it either. I got a handball about 6 to 7 inches or 17 centimeters that was pumped extremely hard and kicked right into my balls from a short distance. I didn't wear protection. My lower body went completely numb and I initially didn't feel any pain, so I basically crouched off the field. After a few minutes, the numbness gradually subsided and was replaced by a pain that just wouldn't stop increasing. I literally thought I lost both of my balls, but after all, I didn't suffer any permanent damage. It was just very, very painful. I had a partial torsion and double-sided infection in them when I got COVID. They said they'd never seen anything like it when I came in. They wanted to work on it quickly to avoid full torsion surgery, but that resulted in completely awake manipulation of my twisted sac. Good lord, it was not an experience I look back on very fondly. How do you look back on something like that fondly? Story 5. Testicular torsion. I was 17 and didn't know what it was. Thought it might be blue balls, so waited until it was the size of a grapefruit and in excruciating pain, and had mom take me to the ER. Half my testicle was dead, but I got a Demerol drip and was all good after that. But oh boy, that pain was significantly worse than the kidney stones. I didn't realize there were so many numbers of the twisted nut club. As I said, mine happened at 17 and wasn't addressed until day 3. At that point, I couldn't sit down or drive due to the massive nut that was preventing me from closing my legs. Anyhow, much of the tissue organ was not savable, so the surgeon had to remove a fair amount. Now I've got some testicles left, and also a whole bunch of scar tissue. It's gross, and I had a low sperm count for a while, but now I've got 2 kids, so The good thing is, when they opened me up, the doc said he'd lasso the other testicle, my right one in this case, to the side so it wouldn't face the same fate as the dead left nut. But guess what? 2 years later, I woke up one morning and felt a familiar pain. I was boarding a plane that morning, but I knew WTF was going on, so I called ahead and had it operated on later that day. I probably should have sued the original surgeon for testicular negligence, but I never pushed it. Meh. Years later, about 10 years ago now, my wife and I headed down the coast, woke up with what I thought were butterflies, and went through the whole process. Ended up barfing and passing out, and my wife drove me, gingerly but still painfully, to the ER, where they looked at me and said, well, he's either in labor or he has a kidney stone. Yep, a hefty 3mm stone lodged in my ureter. That shit was painful, but still nothing compared to the twisted nut. Yep, I got mine from lifting heavy stuff. Waited a couple of hours, but tapped out and had my wife take me to the ER. There I sat in excruciating pain with my head in her lap for like an hour. Then I got called back and the nurse checked my prostate, even though I said the pain was up front. Then my wife and I went to ultrasound and got the 50-cent tour of my sac. While laying on the stretcher, it kind of started relaxing on its own. Then I went and saw a really old urologist who grabbed the boys and gave them a good couple of yanks, then asked if it was tender because I was wincing. I responded, let me yank on yours like that and ask if you're tender. He told me next time to come in sooner because I could have lost it. I'm like, you didn't do anything to fix it, and I've been here for 4 freaking hours. Good times. My son, now 23, then 19, has moderate to severe autism and has difficulty expressing pain, even physical pain, so it's often hard to spot things that would otherwise be very painful to others. He was walking weirdly and I asked him why. He said he didn't know. I asked if he was in pain and he said yes. He said I could look, and I've never been more internally freaked out and extremely calm in my life. He had coped with it for almost 30 hours and showed no external symptoms until I noticed his walk. He ended up having it removed and the hospital was amazed by how resilient he is. He was home within hours and high as hell on codeine, and made me watch 3 days of Star Wars and spewed random Star Wars facts the entire time, right down to casting rejections and filming locations. Best days off of work ever. I think I need a smoke after hearing all of that. Story 6. Trigeminal neuralgia. Excruciating stabbing pains triggered by any and everything. You can't touch your face, brush your teeth, eat, kiss, lay on your side, nothing involving your mouth. It's like a relentless ice pick stabbing you or a million electric shocks. Sooner or later you will want to die. That's why they call it the suicide disease. I went way too far to see this. Hello, fellow sufferers. I was on 3,600 milligrams of gabapentin at my peak, and it freaking sucked. What are your triggers? Mine was cold. I was an American expat living in England when I was diagnosed, and we luckily moved back to the south, and I was about to wean all the way off, and while I still have minor attacks, I wear a dental splint 24 hours a day. I still clench and break my teeth. I don't get them nearly as often. It is so isolating because people just don't understand why you can't do anything but lay there and not move until the pain stops, and that narcotics don't help, and you don't want to be touched. You can't talk, you can't move, you can't think, you can't anything. And I have other chronic illnesses and have given birth 3 times, had gall and kidney stones, have a bulging and perforated disc in my L5 to S1, have RA, I break teeth easily when I clench due to the stress of an incident from my time in the military, so that leads to infections, migraines that are currently being treated with multiple medications and injections, and when I get a TN attack, it is the worst pain. My answer also, truly and easily the worst experience of my entire life, and there is so little that can be done. I called the out-of-hours doctors once because I was honestly worried I'd just kill myself. I was lectured about the service being primarily for cancer patients and accused of having sniffed solvents. The doctors could only throw stronger and stronger pain meds my way, which weren't ideal, as I was a single mom to a 7-year-old at the time. Ended up with a bit of Teflon in my brain to separate the collapsed blood vessel and the nerve that was causing the entire crap show. I just read up on it and there's no cure? The human body can be cruel. Story 7. Sneezed and herniated a disc in my back. Couldn't walk for 5 days. This was almost 2 months ago and I can still barely stand for longer than 5 minutes at a time. The worst part of a herniated disc injury is that by all appearances you look normal, like you should just be able to go snowboarding or wakeboarding or whatever with the crew, or help someone move, or lift that randomly heavy thing, or do whatever, and you can't. And people try not to judge you, but you know they judge you. I've been called old man more times than I can count, and it freaking hurts as bad as my back pain every time I hear that. Like I'd rather have this than paralysis or missing limbs, and my heart goes out to those that have that. It's worse than this, but something very few understand is the mental anguish of knowing you can almost do activities that your peers are doing, but not quite, and that people judge you for it. I hadn't cried in almost 20 years, and a ruptured disc brought me to tears. Not just the pain, but the claustrophobia and panic that sets in when you realize you can't move an inch without feeling like someone stuck a red-hot dagger in your spine and twisted it, and that's after 30 minutes. Then you have to live that way for weeks until you can start moving slowly again. Nearly a decade later, and I still have horrible chronic pain in my back and legs. It really seems like one of those things that will traumatize you for life. Story 8. I woke up during my first wisdom tooth surgery to the dentist drilling the teeth, but still couldn't move. I managed to make a noise when she started scraping out the tooth chips. Turns out she didn't have anesthesia and used a high dose of Vicodin IV, and I had a high tolerance for pain meds because of recreational use with my buddies. I remember her finally noticing and looking into my eyes, and her face just went pale, and she looked so scared I can't imagine what I must have looked like. Aliens used to be my biggest fear. Then I learned about anesthesia awareness, and now that's what my biggest fear is. I've had 2 surgeries, and before each one I begged and begged and begged for them to make sure I was for sure out. Like as I counted down, I was still saying, make sure I'm out, okay? I was probably annoying as hell, but it scares me so much. Fun story time, I have some mega speedy metabolism or something, which makes me process anesthesia quickly. Combine that with me being a prickled nerve for sleep, I wake up to the minimum sound or light signal. So years ago, I broke my arm, a very nasty fracture at that, and needed immediate surgery. Being my first one ever, nobody knew the above, or what I will say now. So turns out that briefly after the surgery, but when I was still supposed to be KO, I woke up. Although I have no recollection of this, and started yanking my 60 staples, freshly operated arm around, and trying to free myself from bed. And it took 4 seasoned docs to hold me down and bind me. Again, I have no memory of this. I pleasantly woke up for real at first, assuming that it had been smooth sailing. bleeding. So in part due to that, and in part because of other complications, I ended up needing a second, much more complex surgery half a year later on the same arm and fracture. The doctors had assumed that it had been a slightly low dose in the previous case, so not much was done differently this time. What happened? In the middle of the surgery, with my two arm nerves literally out of my body and the surgeon sculpting my bone as if it was Michelangelo, I semi-woke up and started moving my canal-open arm around to the panic of all the medical personnel, who thank God quickly reacted and put me back to sleep. Still, the video is nuts. Anyways, not a doc, but yes, a seasoned surgical waker. I'd say that probably it's fine. Normally, you show signs of waking up with more than enough time for the docs to notice before you regain consciousness and a sense of pain. I just awakened a new fear. Story 9. Period cramps that I had at age 16 or 17. They were worse than giving birth, appendicitis, and kidney stones. The pain would cause me to faint while sitting down in school, and I once had a set of cramps so brutal that I was screaming at the top of my lungs in excruciating pain, literally thinking I was going to die. It felt like my lower stomach was on fire, being stabbed, kicked, and twisted repeatedly while being stung by a million wasps. My dad was there, and this is one of 2 times I've ever seen him cry or show fear. I felt this so hard. At one point I vomited and passed out on the bathroom floor at work and had to be transported to the ER. Got a lot of side eyes from people about having to take an ambulance for just period cramps. I still can't believe the pain I endured as a tween or teenager, and was still expected to go to school and play sports because it would have been embarrassing to say I had cramps and it wasn't considered a real excuse. The way the world treats menstruation absolutely sucks. I went to the ER for mine around 15 or 16. I was screaming, moaning, and writhing in pain and had been for at least a couple of hours before my mom took me in. I had a pretty high pain tolerance when I was younger, so it really freaked her out. The drugs they gave me in the ER were magic, and the rest of that day goes down as the only time since I hit puberty that I wasn't in some kind of pain. People are right that the cramps get better as you get older. I would have cramps that knotted up my entire lower body and kept me from walking, made me vomit, made me faint, etc. Now I just need to take a double the recommended dose of ibuprofen for 4 days a month, and that keeps me functional, if a bit sore. So, you know, better. Crazy how pretty much every woman has a story like this. Story 10. Ovarian cyst. Apparently that stuff can kill you, and I've only had it twice ever, but it's worse than anything else I've ever dealt with, and I am not a clever gal, so I've dealt with my share of pain. The first time I had one pop, I was in the shower, maybe 15 or 16 years old. I went down and just laid on the shower floor for a while. No idea how long. I couldn't even scream at first. Eventually, I turned the water off with my foot, crawled out of the tub, and yelled for my mom. I can still see the fear on her face finding me on the bathroom floor like I was. I have PCOS, so they just happen occasionally. I had an OBGYN nurse tell me that an ovarian cyst rupture and appendix burst are at the same spot on the general pain scale as a 9mm gunshot wound, and it was okay to cry. I'd never needed to hear anything more at that moment as a teenager who was hurting and terrified and trying not to act hysterical. Yup, I almost bled out internally and died from one that ruptured and wouldn't stop bleeding on its own. I had my boyfriend at the time take me to the ER at 4 a.m. because I hadn't slept all night from the pain. Ended up being transferred to a different hospital. Had emergency surgery to cauterize the cyst and recovered fine. But the next time I felt a similar pain a year or so later, I didn't even wait. I just went immediately to the ER. Luckily, that time I didn't need surgery. I don't want to be on the wrong side of that. Story 11. Childbirth, traumatic labor, and my hernia repair operation. Same here. I had the epidural, but apparently I was in the wrong position for it to work for a few of the most awful hours of my life. Add to that the blood pressure cuff that I had to wear throughout, thanks preeclampsia, and that always seemed to inflate right as I was having a contraction. And then, after it ended up being a C-section, having to get out of bed to walk the 3 feet to the bathroom. Related, ladies, don't ever let anyone give you crap about having a C-section. It is not the easy way out. It is serious abdominal surgery, where you then have to be able to get up and walk around not too long afterward. We lived in a second-floor garden apartment at the time, and I was in tears thinking about having to walk up and down the stairs when we got home with the baby. They started my C-section, emergency, without anesthesia working. I was in so much pain, they ketamined the hell out of me. I was fully conscious but tripping balls, so I forgot I was human and just existed as the color of pain. It was the worst 1,000 years I think anyone could ever experience. That is not even a joke. I genuinely forgot what being 3D was like, much less human. I thought childbirth would be mentioned a lot sooner. Seems like the most obvious answer. Story 12. I have endometriosis, so that's pretty bad. I ignored kidney stones because I thought they were just kind of moderate cramps. I ended up getting a UTI from passing the stones or something, and ignored that too, because urinary issues are common with endo. The infection spread to my kidneys, and I had to be hospitalized. That kind of sucked. I also have this left-sided pain. Not sure if it's my stomach or my spleen. Hurts so badly that sometimes I want to curl into a fetal position while also removing my flesh. My mom's endo was so bad I saw her pass out in the car from it. Took over a decade for her to get it taken care of. She was bedridden when it happened, and got accused of med-seeking when she asked for help. Sending lots of love your way. I also am familiar with the pain of kidney stones. One landed me in the ER, and then the other came out with no problem. Bodies are weird. I feel this. I too have endometriosis and interstitial cystitis, painful bladder syndrome. When my appendix was slowly trying to burst, I thought it was cramps, and honestly, it didn't hurt that bad at all in comparison. Reluctantly went into the ER only because the pain was in a weird spot. When one of my cysts burst, I couldn't talk for about 4 hours. I was just bent over in tears, shaking. Never went to the ER for that because it's America and I didn't have health insurance at the time. Had no clue if I might die. This is truly one of the most horrifying things anyone can go through. I can't believe so many people deal with it. Story 13. Get my IUD put in and taken out. I love my IUD, and I am on my second one, but it is ridiculous that the doctor didn't put me on some kind of pain meds. I'm glad more people are talking about the pain and advocating for pain management options. The pain only lasted a few seconds, but I almost passed out getting my new IUD put in a few years ago. I'm heavily tattooed in painful spots and have several piercings. I have a high pain tolerance, and that IUD nearly took me out. This is the correct answer. I've been stabbed in the face and bitten by a shark, and the thought of having another IUD insertion makes me nauseous. The absolute most painful experience of my life. Felt like the universe was falling out through my butt. Is the relief it provides for my menstrual cycles worth it? But no one warned me. No one could have warned me. My IUD insertion was excruciating. I've almost never felt pain like that. And then, after 6 weeks of ongoing pain and a million dismissive nurses, I got into the OBGYN only to find out the freaking thing was in my pelvic cavity. I had to have emergency surgery to get it out. I personally had no idea IUDs could be this painful. I mean, it's surgery, but still. Story 14. Necrotizing pancreatitis. Basically, my pancreas burst, and the enzymes that usually digest the food in my stomach instead started digesting me. I was eating myself from the inside out. The pain is indescribable. It took a month-long stay in the ICU, during which time I died 3 times from sepsis, followed by 3 months in a hospital bed. I lost over half my body weight and had to relearn how to walk, talk, and eat. It's been nearly 2 years and I'm finally off my pain meds and just about recovered, but I'll never be the same again. My husband had 5 bouts of pancreatitis in the early 2000s. He had a failed surgery that punctured his stomach. He had a tube inserted into his stomach to pump out the blood. He had a very high pain tolerance, but when I saw him after the surgery, he had tears running down his cheeks. I felt so helpless. He suffered for years. He developed diabetes. A year and a half ago, he passed away after being intubated and his kidneys shutting down. It took 2 long weeks. We couldn't even see each other until they knew he was going to pass away due to COVID restrictions. All the pain and suffering he went through. It breaks my heart. He died at 57. I miss him every day, and I'm not sure my life will ever be normal again. Had acute pancreatitis around 16. For me, the pain was mystical. The worst phase got so bad at some point that it felt like I wasn't myself anymore, but just the pain, as if I didn't have an actual experience of being, but was only a sensation with no mind, no memory, no future, no perception. This means the pain became somehow matter of fact, but the rest, like paramedics talking to me or trying to think about what they were saying, felt foreign and unpleasant. After coming back from it, I was changed. If the pain literally gives you PTSD, it's bad, that's for sure. Story 15. A lot of women and girls will understand this one, but period cramps. I'm not usually one to get horrific period cramps. They're usually bad, but not unbearable. Well, I was at school one time and I was sitting in my class in excruciating pain, sitting in my lesson in tears, where I had to go to the matron/school nurse, and she gave me some water and a sick bowl. After about 45 minutes, she sent me back to class, but I was in so much pain I had no choice but to beg to go home. She didn't let me. I went to my next class and again burst into floods of tears since it was just so unbearable when the teacher advised me to visit the matron again, still not being allowed home. In the end, I went to my head of year where she called the matron telling her I was to be sent home since I'd never been like this in my 5 years of being at that school, meaning it was so strange for me to be in such an amount of tears that she was quite concerned for me. I've never been in such pain in my life, and I would never wish the way I felt that day on anyone. I think some women who don't experience period pain assume that other women are overreacting. I didn't have any pain in the first year or so and thought people were exaggerating. Then the heavy period started and pain, and then one time had to spend a whole day with a cold flannel on my stomach, unable to think or move. I got my period at 11. They were the worst at 13. I remember sitting in class and having to rush out because the pain made me vomit, so I threw up in the bathroom and then lost all strength and lay on the dirty ground. The teacher didn't want to let me go because we were preparing for a test, but I didn't care. I called my mom as I was dry heaving, having hot and cold flashes while my muscles were burning and I couldn't get up. I still remember my face laying practically next to the disgusting plunger they put there. My periods were like that up until around 19 years old. Still have the same symptoms, just less extreme. Some people really underestimate the symptoms others have. Yeah, a lot of people tend to underestimate the sheer amount of pain women go through on a regular basis. Story 16. Currently in the process of a big bump right above my groin, the pouch area, and it hurts to even move. Should probably get it looked at. Edit. After the fact. Thank you all for the suggestions and concerns. Thankfully, it is not a hernia or a burst appendix, just an abscess from ingrown hairs after shaving the area down under and my pouch area. Seems I was a bit careless in cleaning the clippers/aftercare of said pouch area. Currently waiting to get drained of the bastard, and since I've been through this before, I'm not 100% looking forward to it, but it's better than suffering. Probably a hernia. When I had mine, I was able to push on it, and it would make the bulge disappear momentarily. I found out a few days later I was pushing my intestines back in as the tear in my lower abdomen was allowing them to spill out. Good luck. I get them so often. I use sterile needles from work. I'm a lab tech in a hospital and clean the area well, and then drain them myself. Or if they are really, really bad, then I use a hot compress to help bring it to a head and just get a hole started so they can drain. My doctor now has me use antibacterial body wash and take a bath with a cup of bleach once a week. That has really helped. I still get them, but not like before. I can't afford laser hair removal currently, but I'm wanting to do what I can. The bikini area is where they develop, so I will get those hairs permanently removed someday. It's surprisingly easy to get a hernia. I've had to deal with it myself. Story 18. I contracted spinal meningitis in my late 20s, an infection in the brain. The hospital had me in a negative pressure isolation chamber for 2 months, and during that time I had full control over a button that would directly inject morphine into my IV line because the pain was so incredibly severe. Even after being discharged from the hospital, the pain went on for about a year. I could not sleep lying down because that made the pain worse, so I had to lean against the headboard where I would simply moan the entire night. Basically, it was like having my head in a vice for about 12 months. Ironically, one of the few moments of respite I had from this pain was during the 3 times that they did a spinal tap on me, which is when they inject a needle about 8 inches long directly into the spinal column to extract cerebrospinal fluid. Most people consider a spinal tap to be an excruciating experience, but for me, it was actually a relief because it relieved some of the incredible pressure on my brain. The doctors thought that it was pretty crazy that I enjoyed the spinal tap. Aside from the agonizing year of pain, I also had to relearn to walk and also relearn to speak. Amazingly, I made a full recovery, which was not expected. Any sort of spine pain just isn't good. I can't even imagine spinal meningitis. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story that you would like to share with us, please leave it down in the comments below. Unless it's really terrifying, then maybe keep it to yourself. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like, and don't forget to subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.